just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone, joined by Ryan Roberts, and we are moving on cornerback week. We are on the third pairing before we drop our top 5 rankings for the 2023 cornerback class. The pairing that we have today, after doing Eli Ricks, Kelee Ringo, Clark Phillips, and Garrett Williams, today is now Cam Smith from South Carolina and Cam Hart from Notre Dame. Ryan consistently is a little bit of a hack for pairing guys based on silly little similarities.
It makes sense. This one makes sense, Joe. They're both.
Did you do it? I know I asked you yesterday,
Yeah.
but did this have anything to do with them having the same name?
It does not. It did not. So I mean, the easy pairing that we did to start the week was Kelee Ringo, and Eli Ricks. That was an easy one. Yesterday, I wanted, of course, to do Clark Phillips from Utah, who was a big fan of the show, by the way. But I needed to find somebody that had a similar body type to him. And there's not a ton of sub 6 foot corners in this class. So that's why Garrett Williams was a part of the conversation. And today, I mean, who else are we going to do, Joe? I mean, like, there's some other interesting players like the Caillou Blue Kelly kid, Joey Porter Jr., but I think that these two kind of stand out as far as in this class. And they're both similarly sized guys. So stop overanalyzing things.
Well, to be fair, Cam Hart's a little bigger than Cam Smith.
Well, yes, but all right. So the only other thing I could have done was pair Kelee Ringo with Cam Hart because they're like the exact same size. But
yeah, but
yes.
The talent level is vastly different.
I wouldn't say vastly different. A little different though. But yes, we'll get into that.
By the way, I have to say props to the Notre Dame Sports Information Department for actually putting accurate full measurements on guys' heights instead of rounding up like every other school does. Like we actually got like a 6'2" and change as his listed size.
More schools are starting to do that, Joe. You know which is a fun school, which is it's going to sound weird because I never thought I would mention UConn on this show, except for like a Travis Jones. But UConn is super specific. You should go look at their site. They like go to like the quarter of an inch on players and stuff, like 7/8 of an inch. Like they go to the fraction of an inch on their site for like the measurements, and they list it like scouts would. They do like 6071 instead of like 6'2.5" or whatever it is, which is kind of cool.
I guess you got to do what you have to do to get attention on your guys as prospects when most of them are in fact not prospects.
They got Jim Moore Jr. Okay, it's turning around over there. It's turning around.
Yeah, they also have really great coverage from their Sports Illustrated site. Let's get into it.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that. Let's get into it. Before we do, though, we have today is Thursday when the show is dropping. We've got the first full week of preseason games. And if you are sick of betting on baseball like me and you want to bet on these preseason games, you got to go to Bet Online. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports, contests, and even with first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information, from live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to join today and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Ryan, talking about Cam Smith first from South Carolina. What do you got on him on his background?
Yeah, so I actually have a decent amount on this one, Joe. So he was a pretty highly recruited kid. I think consensus 4-star is what I had across every major recruiting platform. He was ranked as the number 150 overall player by the 247 Sports Composite Ranking, which composite ranking takes all the recruiting rankings together and it kind of averages everything out. So 150 will tell you that he was a pretty highly recruited kid. He has kind of had to wait his turn a little bit. I mean, when he first came in, obviously he's behind guys like J.C. Horn and Israel Mukuamu and all those types of guys. So he saw a little bit of time his first year, but he also only played in 3 games, redshirt freshman year in 2020. I think he made 3 starts, so he played a little bit, but he was dealing with a leg injury at some point during the season. So 2021 was really his breakout season. He was named All-SEC by Associated Press, 4th-team All-SEC by Phil Steele, led the team, I believe, with 14 pass breakups and 3 interceptions last year. So he was a highly productive player. And a quick note here, Joe. Ready? So I checked in because this is the best part about what we do is we always have some good connects after interviews and all that good stuff. So there was a former South Carolina cornerback that, I was a pretty big fan of.
And
when
you
he was
still talk
out.
to?
And I still talk to JC Horn. So I messaged JC. I texted him earlier in the year, or a few months ago, I should say. And I asked him about Jaheim Bell and I asked him about Cam Smith, just like what his opinion of it were. So he told me Cam is very athletic. He's going to test pretty good, which tells me JC's telling me that he's not as athletic as him, which I also agree. But he said that he has a really nice overall game. He's got a little bit of everything. So good remarks from former South Carolina cornerback JC Horn. I think that's kind of what you see on film, and we're not getting like super into the film yet with his background, but he's 6 foot, 188, has pretty good length, athleticism's kind of all good all around. So he's a South Carolina kid, played at the University of South Carolina, and he's coming off of a breakout year, obviously, in 2021.
The one thing and it's cool that you got that tidbit from Horn. The one thing that I forget if you sent it to me or if I just happened to see it on my timeline, there were attempted comparisons to not the type of player, but potential rise in draft stock for Cam Smith and JC Horn. I don't see that. And I remember watching some JC Horn to get a sense of him when you were talking so highly of him. He was a lot longer. He was a lot more aggressive. His mentality was very different, and he was a much better athlete. Doesn't mean that Cam Smith's not good, but when JC Horn was projected as this mid-second round pick that you were saying should be the first corner off the board, and he rose, I think that Cam Smith is more likely to stay in that mid-second round, third round slotting.
Yeah, I really did like how JC kind of phrased it to me, just because I think that I believed already the same thing that he said, is that he's a good all-around athlete, but I don't see anything special about him, right? Yeah. Like, I think his long speed's good. I don't think there's going to be issues there. I think his short area quickness might actually be better than JC. Like, that's a close one in my opinion. Like, but one thing I really do like about Cam Smith's game, which I think is the best part of his game, is that he has really good ball skills.
Like, I was just about to say that.
He has fantastic ball skills working down the field. Sideline, it looks like he has a former wide receiver background. I don't know how much wide receiver he played in high school, but he is very comfortable just with his ability to extend and keeping good body positioning and, kind of having that body control to work through contact a little bit. So that was the best part of his game. I just did not see anything special. I think he's going to be a good corner on the next level. I didn't see a great athlete. I saw a good athlete overall, and I hated his tackling. I hated the tackling, man, because he's an ankle biter. Like, it scares me, if I'm being honest. He reminds me of somebody too, and
who should
I do the comp now or should
do it?
He's a little grabby down the field. He reminds me, not as good an athlete as this player, but I have similar concerns with the grabbiness down the field as I did with CJ Henderson coming out of Florida. If you remember, I was not a big CJ Henderson guy. I had like a second to third round grade on him just based on traits, because like stupid traits. The kid could run, he is long, all that good stuff, but he panicked a little bit down the field at times. And Cam does not panic at the catch points like a CJ Henderson does, but I think there was moments working vertically where there's just a little too much of a pull, man. Like, he's just a little grabby down the field, which worries me a little bit on the next level. But overall, I like Cam Smith. Good football player. Just I didn't see tremendous upside with him.
What did you watch the Clemson game?
Yes.
Yep. So the pick that I'm gonna refer to,
the end zone?
No, but did he also have one in the end zone?
Or was it a pass breakup in the end zone? It was a deep ball that was against number 80, I think, for Clemson. I can't remember exactly.
There was a ball over the middle of the field that he was tracking, and I thought that whichever receiver he was covering was going to make the catch, but he extended and he came down with that football. Like, that was a pretty decently placed ball, but because of his ball skills, he was able to come down with it. But that's like the one thing for me, and you hit the nail on the head on his description. Quality athlete, not an elite one, But the ball skills, I think, is a huge redeeming quality for him that you can make that argument for. Obviously, top 100, maybe a little bit outside of the top 50.
I like the length, though. I mean, is it as good as JC? We'll see. I think it's close-ish, though. I mean, he's not as tall as JC, but like just the general arm length.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw the kid extend his arms and be able to, break, close some windows and all that type of stuff. So I think he's got good length, good overall athlete. I think he's just going to be a good football player. But I mean, again, I think that it's gone a little too far as like people are generally comparing him as far as like what his stock could be comparative to a JC Horn, and like I do not see that. I do not see that at all. No.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to do to Cam Smith and to make that assertion that he could rise that much.
It's just I understand why it's a comp, because I mean we just saw a kid literally 2 years ago from the same school make the transition, right, and be a top number 8 overall pick or whatever. So like I understand it, but just because he's also plays for South Carolina and he has dreads doesn't mean that he's JC Horn, right? Like that's that's a little lazy in my opinion, just a little bit. He's a good player though, but I just don't see the upside of JC Horn.
How shocking that other members of the media are lazy when making analysis and evaluation.
You said it, not me.
So shocking. Cam Hart, who close to home for both of us.
Yep.
Not literally, but because we're both Notre Dame fans, getting to watch Cam Hart. I was saying to you yesterday, I almost completely forgot that Cam Hart existed because he's not really the big prospect that's brought up amongst the group. We've already talked about all of the big prospects, and then we've got one more other big prospect that we're going to talk about next week with Brandon Joseph. But Cam Hart, man, his size at over 6'2", he is freaking massive. Not as big as Keely Ringo, but he is a big freaking dude. Any background notes that you have on Hart?
Yeah, I mean, so he's not as heavy as Keely, right? But I mean, he is a verified 6'2.5" with 32 plus inch arms. So Cam Hart is a long cornerback for Notre Dame, and he is actually, according to NFS, the highest ranked player on Notre Dame right now, because Michael Mayer's only a junior. Isaiah Foskey's only a redshirt junior, and Brandon Joseph's only a redshirt junior. So they were all not graded by NFS. So he was the highest graded player on this team returning. So the notes on him, Joe, former wide receiver. He was actually brought into Notre Dame as a very under-recruited kid out of the state of Maryland. He's from Good Counsel High School, which is a good football program in the state of Maryland. Brought in as a wide receiver. He played his whole freshman year wide receiver. He was going to make the transition to cornerback as a sophomore, and he did. But the issue was that was the COVID year, so he missed the entire off season making that transition. So he played in spurts in 2020 as a corner, but he wasn't able to get a starting spot or anything because he just had limited reps in kind of the preseason and everything. So this past year was his breakout campaign. I think he had 2 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, 42 total tackles, started 10 games out of the 13 total for Notre Dame. So had a very, very productive season, but he was not I mentioned this a little bit, he was not a highly recruited kid at all. He was the number 97 wide receiver rated by 247 Sports. So not number 97 overall player, the number 97 wide receiver in his class coming out. So he was not a highly recruited kid, came to Notre Dame as a wide receiver, made the transition to cornerback, and he was also just on Feldman's freak list that came out yesterday. So they said that on the freaks list, he has a 38-inch vert, 11'2" broad jump, which is pretty good. I mean, when I say pretty good, that's hyperbolic by saying that's fantastic.
That's Obi Melifonwu-esque.
Yeah, man. And then he also was timed at 21.7 miles per hour on the GPS this offseason too. So kid can run, kid's explosive, and kid is super long. And he's still very new to the position, which gets me excited personally.
So the explosiveness, you definitely see that. He's obviously very, very big. I will say, though, I think he's a better athlete than Eli Ricks, but similar to Eli Ricks, he's a good athlete for his size. I don't think he's an elite athlete amongst the group, but he's a good athlete, moves well for his size. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Finish your thought. I didn't mean to cut
No,
you off.
the only thing I was going to say that my hang up with Cam Hart and the reason why I'm not willing, because a guy this big that's as explosive as you're talking about should be a first round pick. My hang up on him is the short area quickness, the inability to redirect. There were a couple reps where I watched of him where he had to cut and completely redirect to another direction. If he has to do that, he's almost dead on some of these plays. Like it takes him so long to transition to get out of his break because he is so long. And that happens with tall corners. And it's disheartening to see that these tall corners that fit that typical billing of cutting because it takes longer for taller guys to move. But that was just the big thing that I saw. I watched the Cincinnati game, a little bit of the Cincinnati game and the USC game. USC game was probably a mistake to watch because Drake London completely cooked the Notre Dame secondary.
Well, he cooked Clarence Lewis a lot more than Cam Hart, but yeah. Yep.
But there were a couple reps where you saw the mistakes that he made. But the redirecting part, which is something you can't have issues with as a corner, is something that I'm a little hung up on.
Yeah, so I'd say this. He's a very vertically oriented player. So I agree that the short area quickness isn't great. My question, though, is because, again, he's a one-year starter at cornerback. I do think there's some false steps in his transitions at times. So my question is it going to be better this year than it was last year as far as changing direction? I do think that when he sees things in front of him, he changes direction and gets downhill very quickly. Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying, though, as far as like laterally changing direction, right? Like that's more kind of the hiccup for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, there was one play. I don't mean to cut you off. There was one play I remember against USC where he sat in his zone and then he realized Drake London his route was in between his zone and the safety behind him. Mm-hmm. And by the time he realized that, it took him like 2 seconds just to plant, cut, and then move up. And Drake London already made a catch and a 15-yard gain. Like that was where I think epitomized that lack of ability to cut.
Okay. Well, let's go through the positives, Joe, and then we'll circle back to the negatives. So long, explosive. I think this kid's going to run 4.4s. Like I don't think many players are just going to run past him, right? Like he's got that ability to turn and run, and he can fly. One of the better corners, and this is the most surprising thing for me, as far as being a younger player at the position. He is an aggressive player against the run, and he is incredibly physical against screens. Like he comes up like a bat out of hell against screens, and he makes a lot of nice plays in that department. The length is obvious. My biggest hang up with him actually is I don't think that he plays with great ball skills down the field, which is weird.
Which is ironic because he's a receiver.
Right. I wish that if he played the ball down the field like Cam Smith does, then I would be slapping first round grade on this kid and being like, yeah, in the right system, that's a first round player. Yeah. If he was better at playing the football down the field, absolutely. That is my biggest hang up with Cam Hart, because I think height, weight, speed, it's fantastic. And the progress he made as a first-year cornerback, at least a full-time starter last year, I thought gives you a lot of peek into what the upside is, because he is not nearly a finished product despite being a fourth-year player this year. So I'm excited to see that. I am in between with your take on the change of direction, because I don't think that it's ever going to be fantastic because he is a long-legged kid, right? Like it's not going to be incredibly flexible, kind of change of direction. But I think that there's just some technical areas from missteps with his footwork that may make it better. And it will at least be solid enough in that department. So those are the things that I think need to be cleaned up. I'm excited about him, though, because Notre Dame hasn't had this type of athlete at corner ever. I mean, in my lifetime, Troy Pride was incredibly quick-footed and fast, but like he wasn't long. Like he was like 5'11" and some change. Julian Love was a really smart football player, but he wasn't long or explosive. Like this is like, you have to go back to like a Todd Light era of football to like get any corner that looks anything like a guy like a Cam Hart does. So I think there's a lot of upside here, and he is very far from a finished product as it stands.
I don't think it's a stretch to say, though, that Cam Hart best serves playing in a zone heavy scheme. Like I don't know if I'd really like to ask him to play a lot of man, and they run a lot of zone at Notre Dame, so we're kind of exposed to that. We don't get to see him play in man, but based on, again, that lack of short area quickness, it's probably better that he plays in zone.
Sort of. I actually think he would be a pretty good press man corner because I think as long as you press outside and have the ability to turn and run, like I don't think many guys will get on top of him. So as long as he's consistent with his ability at the line of scrimmage, I think he could be a nice press man corner. I think he could definitely play zone, like a cover 3 heavy scheme. Like sure, absolutely, because he's got the speed and he's got the length for that spot at all. Off man, I agree with you. Like he's not going to be an exceptional off man corner. It's just not going to be his thing. But I think in a press man system where he has the ability to unlock his length at the line of scrimmage, I think he can do that stuff. I do.
If we were to project, though, where would you slot him? I think that I still stand by. Same thing with Cam Smith. Cam Hart is right outside of that top 50, late second, early third. I think it's realistic with those deficiencies.
I think right now I would say Cam Smith is a second or third round player. Similarly, I think that Cam Hart is a second-ish player because I think his traits are better than Cam Smith, and I think he will be drafted higher. I think, though, that there is upside for Cam Hart to have more of a rise than a Cam Smith, though, because I think there's more untapped potential. I think there's just better overall athleticism. So he's the guy that I think could help himself the most this year, but I think Cam Smith is just a rock-solid day 2 type of football player.
Yeah, I think both these guys, it's not too much of a stretch. It feels weird with this corner class that I like we've had 2 guys overall that have been mentioned as first rounders, and I wasn't as high on Clark Phillips as you were, but we really only have one guy who's a first round, clear cut, guaranteed first round pick, which is so weird compared to the past few classes.
Yeah, man. No, it's. I think there's a decent amount of depth in the cornerback class, but I do not think right now that there's like those clear cut guys. I mean, even Kelee Ringo is a little bit of a projection, right? I mean, like he's extremely talented. I'm willing to bet on those traits, but I wouldn't say that he had first round tape last season. I would just say he had first round traits and then flashes of first round tape, right? So it's an interesting cornerback group. I was a little higher on Clark Phillips, obviously. You mentioned that already, but we'll see how it all turns out, man. The one thing that I'm missing from this class a little bit, and I don't know if you agree with this, Joe, is that Kelee Ringo has great traits. I think Cam Hart has great traits. The other corners we've watched, there's not like outstanding physical traits, right? Like, and so I think there's more just good football players than potentially like great type of players in this class.
We're going to share our rankings for the corner class on our next episode on Friday. So make sure you tune in for that. That is going to be it for our last corner scouting report show. We've got one more position group as well coming next week. So make sure you're subscribed at Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft, and at NFL Prospects Pod. Talk to you later, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day.